I've told everyone. The main part of the Parsha, it deals with the counting of the Jewish people. The Jewish people will be counted again in Parsha, in Chumash Bamidbar. That's why in the language of Chazal, it's not called the Chumash Bamidbar, it's called Chumash Apkudim. It's the Chumash of the count. In the non-Jewish world, in the English, it's called Numbers. So I'll discuss with you, God willing, tomorrow, why we call it Bamidbar anyway. But in the count, there are many things that to be noted. One glaring thing that appears on the surface is that there are no odd numbers in the count. We're talking about counting 630,000 people. We're talking about 12 different tribes. Later, we'll talk about counting 23,000 Leviim. It's never 611. It's always 610, 620, 650. Why is that? So there are different interpretations. One interpretation, which is the simplest one, but probably the one that's most difficult to accept, is that that's the way the count was. Those were the numbers that were achieved. And the fact that it happened twice in a row, when you're dealing with well over 1,200,000 people, is just one of the phenomena that accompanies everything else regarding the Jewish people and their sojourn in the desert of Sinai. However, there's a second opinion, and that's a rule that Chazal instituted regarding numbers generally. And that is, so to speak, you round off numbers. Instead of something being 608, you say it's 610, because it's easier to handle numbers when they come in bunches of 10, 50, 100, than when they come in the odd numbers that exist. And we have examples of that in the Torah itself. Now we're in the midst of the Sfiras HaOmer. So when the Torah it says, Tisperu Chamishim Yom, 50 days. We only count 49 days. We say the 50th day is Shavuot. The Stokin complain about Shavuos on two grounds. One ground was because it said, Sfartim lachem machras haPesach, machras haShabbos. You count from the day after Shabbos. So that meant that Sfira always began on a Sunday. And Chazal said that Machras HaShabbos means Machras HaPesach. You count from the second day of Pesach on. That was one difference. And then the second difference was that they said 50 days is 50 days. The Torah said Tisbru Chamishim Yom. So why do you say 49? So it came out, I mean, all this has to be borne in mind when we consider our situation. We think that we have problems and situations and it's not what it should be, etc. Here we're talking about that they didn't agree on the basic yontif, when it happened. And the tzdokim were a considerable number. There were many that said that they were close to the majority of the Jewish people. They certainly were the government. To a great extent, they were the kahuna. We see in the Gemara in Yoma, the Mishnah, that to make the Kohen Gadol swear that the Avodah on Yom Kippur would not be done according to the tzdokim. So it would be like, I don't know, lahavdil, I don't, just, I'm only saying it so it would resonate in your ear. And, you know, you have somebody that's not an observant Jew be the chief rabbi in the country. So Chazal were faced with that problem. So okay, they said that they have a tradition, halacha l'Moshe Sinai, that when the Torah says numbers, it rounds off numbers. So 49 is called 50. Minyan hasochem. It's the number that will end with 50, but it is only 49. And that was the same halacha that they said by Malkos, receiving lashes. So it says, Arboim Yakenu, 40 lashes. The Gemara Malkos proves to us that it was only 39. And that it was called Arboim because it's Minyan Asochem as Arboim. It's the count that the next number will be 40. And therefore, we find this pattern throughout the Torah that numbers are rounded off into the tens or into the hundreds. And we'll see extreme examples of this in the Mishnah. The Gemara in Kedushin. So the Gemara says that a woman is entitled, have a tradition entitled to 2,000 shkolim under certain circumstances. And the Gemara proves that it's only 1,630 shkolim. So then why did it say 2,000? They said because it says, if we want to round it off, when we're talking in thousands, we round it off in thousands. So that's a big leap because there you're not jumping one number like 49 to 50 or 39 to 40, you're jumping hundreds. So we see that there is such a pattern in the Torah, in halacha, that we deal with blocks of numbers and not with individual numbers. So therefore, there are portions that say that was how the count in the Midbar also worked. That's why every tribe came out with even numbers. It wasn't even numbers. And naturally, under ordinary circumstances, you would always have odd numbers, but they didn't count the odd numbers. They didn't mention them. They rounded it off to the next group of numbers, to the next tens, to the next 50s, to the next hundreds, etc. And the Mefarshim say that they derived that from when Moshe appointed judges. So it was Sorei Alofim, and Sorei Meos, and Sorei Chamishim, and Sorei Asoros. So he took the Jewish people and he set them up in blocks, thousands, hundreds, 50s, tens. So that was the block that you had. So if your block was 6, automatically it was counted like it was a block that was 10. And if your block was 4, so then it automatically went back to the other block. And therefore it was set up on that system that those were the breakdown of the numbers that exist in the Torah. Therefore, Chazal say you find the same thing. And the Torah talks about damages, talks about money, talks about the worth, about fines. So it's always a round number, 50. By Erchin we had at the end of the parsha, so it's 50. Some people are worth more, some people are worth less. Depends on age, depends on physical qualities, etc. The Torah always had it as a block number. And therefore, Chazal said that it was also to count the Jewish people. The count of the Jewish people is the count of the coins of the half shekel. It's not the count of the people. So that brings up a third way to look at this. Since it's also to count people, so how did they know what the count was? So we find by Shaul HaMelech, for instance, when he made the census, it says, Vayif Gedeim Bat Loim. Everybody had to bring a sheep, and then they counted the sheep. They didn't count people. If that's the case, so if you had, let's say, 993 sheep, so they brought another 7 sheep to make it 1,000, because then it would fit. So that the people could be in odd numbers, but what they counted, the half shekel or the sheep or whatever method they used to count, that could be in exact numbers, even in numbers that are broken up. I remember that my wife, she taught for many years English subjects in the Yeshiva Spring Valley in Muncie. And there was a period of time in the United States when the United States goes through, I think every civilization goes through periods of insanity. It's going through one right now. Sometimes the insanity is so great that you never recover. And that's the end of the empire, the end of the country. If you look in history, that's you have to look at it. So one of the periods of insanity in the late 1970s was something that was called the new math. The new math said we are going to teach children addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, not 611 times 243, but we're going to say 611 is like 610, and 143 is like 140, and that's how we're, and then that's how they're going to do it. There's no more exact numbers. Today, there's no more men or women, but then there were no more exact numbers. So my wife was a very loyal teacher. So that was what the textbook said, and that's what the regents in the state of New York, the experts, said how to do it. So she taught that way. So she gave a problem, a homework problem, fourth grade girls, that Rivka bought something for $1.41, and her parents gave her a $10 bill, and then she bought a candy for another 36. And you're supposed to figure out what the change was under the new math. So the kids estimated $1.41 is $1.40, and $1.11 is $1.10, whatever it is, and that was the problem. There was one girl in the class. It's not nice of me to say, but I'm not a candidate for anything. You should remember that. So there was a girl in the class that was of Germanic extraction, and she handed me a blank paper. So my wife said to her, "Why didn't you do the homework?" She says, "I spoke to my father, and he said, when it comes to money, we never estimate." So there is such a stream here too, that in reality, when it came to people, they never estimated. But when they came to count what represented the people, so that they added or subtracted in order to make it even numbers, so that it would be easier to remember. And they were interested, therefore, in having this general picture rather than the exactitude of having every number exact. We find it in the Gemara, by the way. The Gemara discusses pi, 3.14 until infinity, to find the diameter of a circle to the circumference that exists. So the Gemara counts it. The Gemara didn't have a decimal system. So the Gemara said it's like 3 1/10. So they estimated that it's like 3.10, but the Gemara itself says that it's infinite. You can never get to the right number. And that there's a concept built into mathematics. The Meforshim say, the Rishonim say on the spot, that the Rebbeinu Shalom made it purposely that way, that even in mathematics, which is the most exact science, there's a concept of infinity and of something that you can't know really, but that you have to come on to somehow estimating in order to achieve the goal that you're trying to work with to understand the math. So all of this is in the fact of the count that we read in this week's Parsha, the count of the Jewish people in the desert. Rabbi Chananya ben Akashu, Me'erotz HaKadosh Baruch Hu, V'Zakat Yisrael, V'ficha Chir B'lahem Torah Mitzvot, Shenamar, Adonai Chafetz Aman Tzidko Yamil Torah.